This is Robert Abens. I'm doing Education 106. We're going to talk about the safety and proper use of a power saw. Okay, what I have here is a worm drive saw. A worm drive has a gear driven, it's not a direct drive. Okay, I'm going to show you the options. This is a direct drive saw where the motor goes directly. The problem with this is for a right-handed person, you have to look over the saw to use it. So I'm going to talk about the safety of both of them, but I'm going to use the worm drive saw. This is a worm drive saw, and what I want us to do is we're going to look at the cord, make sure that it's working properly. So we make sure for no frays. This is a saw, of course it is unplugged. I'm going to see if the switch works. I want to make sure that it springs back because an older saw, it could stick, seldom happens, but you always want to make sure that that works. As well as the other safety, there is a stationary blade guard that is always stationary, and you got to make sure that that is solid and secure. But there is a bottom guard that moves back and forth, and you need to make sure that's spring loaded. The reason it moves is because you have to cut through the material, and that has to move. This has a good blade. We did check the saw, make sure nothing's wrong. The cord is good, and so are the guards. So everything's in place. We can plug it in, but before I plug in, I want to show you the proper use of how to use it and the dangers of using if you're not sawing correctly. Of course, we have to have the material, and I think I got my camera good where it's secured material. We don't want to cut in between the sawhorses. If we cut in between the sawhorses, we're going to get a kickback, and the saw is going to bind where you're cutting, and the saw is going to want to kick back at you. So you need to have cutting on the outside of your sawhorses. I have it supported, and I use a board underneath so I know what I'm cutting. Then, so that's the biggest thing. The kickback is the most important. But I also want to show you the different adjustments. When we are cutting 2x material, which is 1.5 inches thick, we want to cut a little bit more than that, so I'm setting it. The new skill saws even have a place where it says 2x. So you want to cut about 1 5/8 inches, 1 3/4 inches, so a little bit more. Because if I had it all the way down, which is 2 1/4, it's going to have more blade underneath, and you're not going to be able to control the saw as well. So always set the depth. The other one, so we're setting it, and sometimes we'll cut 1x material, so we're going to adjust it even less. And then there's another adjustment in front, which we call the bevel cut. And the bevel cut is what you will use when you're cutting not only rafters, but you're cutting jack rafters or hip rafters, because they have to be at an angle. But for our purposes, we are going to cut at 0, and we're going to set it at the 1.5 inches for them. So now I want to show you, I will show you this. I'm also going to show you the saw blade. Because the board comes up here, you want to have the blade going forward, but also going up, because the rotation of this blade is going up, and so you want the blade. I've seen, really, I'll tell you the truth, I've seen people put these on backwards. In a direct drive, it is the opposite way. It's still up, but it's flipped. So I'm going to show you 2 different blades. This one is specifically for a worm drive saw, and this is correct for the writing, because this will go, all right, it'll go on this side, so this is correct. But both saw blades, and this has the diamond arbor, which is needed in a worm drive. But for a sidewinder, which most homeowners use, but not in the construction, has a direct, it's like a 5/8 arbor there that they use. But this one is put this way, but on a worm drive you have to put it opposite. So what I'm going to show you, so I've shown you the safety features. I've shown you to not cut in between the sawhorses, but cut it on the outside or to clamp it down. So now I want to go and show you the proper way to cut material. So I'm going to set that down. Of course, I have a clean material or area that I'm working in, and I'm going to make a mark. Oh, I'm going to go like every inch, and I want to show you that I'm cutting on the right side, because I was talking about a worm drive, but I want to emphasize that I'm going to show you how to cut appropriately. Here is another worm drive. This one is magnesium, so it's a little bit lighter, but I'm going to set it at the 0 setting, and I'm going to plug it in and show the proper way to handle, to saw correctly. So we're going to plug it in, and it does have, I did check the switch, but so we're going to check it. I got 2 hands, and I'm going to check it. And for purpose, I'm going to show you how to saw, but my biggest thing is how you're cutting. I have a line here, and the appropriate thing is I'm going to leave the line. So when I'm cutting and the piece I want is on the left, and that's what I like about a worm drive saw, I can look at the blade. I have a 0 mark on the table of the saw, but I'm only cutting 2x4. It's going to be very difficult because the guide is 3.5 inches into the wood and I can barely see it. So I have to look down in the blade, which is so nice about a worm drive, and I'm looking at the blade as it cuts the lumber. So what I'm going to do, since I know I want to keep the right side, I'm going to put my blade just on the right side of, or the scrap piece is what I'm going to cut. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you. And I like to shut the switch, I turn the switch off before I'm almost cutting. That way the blade, which has momentum, will shut off before I'm complete. And then when I set the saw down, I'm going to set it down sideways in case the blade was still moving and the guard would happen to catch, which it doesn't, but if it ever did, then I would be safe by putting it down sideways. So the piece I have cut, I don't have the line, but the line is on the board that I'm leaving. But sometimes the piece I want is on the right side of the material. So now I'm going to cut I'm going to be on the left side of the line because the piece that I want is the scrap piece that I'm setting off. So I'm going to cut that. So the line is on this side, but what I have done is I've looked through the blade of the saw and I've looked through it so I could see the line even though I was cutting, even though the blade was on what I would call the blind side or the left side of the line that I want to leave. So now what I want to tell you about, so that's how you cut. Now I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to unplug it. Now I want to adjust. So not only do we have a straight cut, but we have what is called a bevel cut. Now the bevel cut is, I could cut an angle with the saw, cutting at the, not perpendicular to the board, but I'm cutting it at an angle. But I also have a bevel cut of the blade. So I'm going to take the front adjustment. I still keep that at 1.5 inches on the depth, but I'm going to set this at a 45 or whatever the pitch of the roof is. It could be more, it could be less. But a 45-degree pitch is a 12-12. Not a common, but it is common in bigger homes where they want more aesthetic and a bigger roof. But I'm going to set it at a 45. This is what we call a bevel. And not only am I going to do a bevel cut, which is for a hip or a jack rafter, but I'm also going to put a pitch on it. Now we could do a straight pitch, but for simplicity, I'm going to do a pitch and a bevel, both on the wood is what and I'm going to do the pitch at a 45 degree. All right, so I'm taking the saw, but this case, what I have to do, I cannot look at the back side, which is so convenient for a worm drive, but I'm gonna look down through the foot of the saw and I'll see the blade where I can see my line and make a perfect cut. Okay, so I did have a little hesitation. I do have a fairly new blade. For simplicity, I made the cut, so not only is this a pitch, but it's also a bevel. And I do have some demonstrations here. This is a pitch cut, which is straight, and this is the bevel cut of a saw. And that concludes our demonstration. Thank you very much. All right, Robert Avens out.